Some roads are more than just routes from one place to another. They hide stories that disappear without a trace. Travellers have entered these paths and never returned, leaving behind unanswered questions that haunt locals and puzzle authorities. From shadowed forests to remote mountain passes, each road carries its own secrets, shaped by history, geography, and whispers of the unexplained. Some vanishings are documented, while others survive only in rumour, passed down through generations. Travel with us down these enigmatic highways, where unsettling legends and unexplained events continue to puzzle those who pass through. The Devil's Backbone, Texas. The Devil's Backbone stretches for nearly 25 miles through the rolling hills of central Texas, a narrow ridge that rises sharply from the surrounding plains. The road follows the spine of this natural formation, twisting and turning in ways that seem almost unnatural, as if it was carved to confuse travellers rather than guide them. On clear days, the ridge offers breathtaking views of oak and cedar forests, dotted with wildflowers, but the beauty conceals a history that is far from peaceful. Locals speak in hushed tones about the disappearances, and few dare to drive the road at night. Stories of vanished travellers date back decades. In 1968, a young couple named Richard and Margaret Collins set out from Austin on a Sunday afternoon to enjoy the scenic drive. Witnesses reported seeing their red Ford Thunderbird weaving along the narrow path, headlights piercing the late evening haze. By the time a search party was organised the following morning, the vehicle had disappeared entirely. Search teams scoured the ridge and surrounding valleys for miles, but there was no sign of the car. No tracks in the dirt, nothing to explain where they had gone. Even experienced drivers claim the Devil's Backbone plays tricks on the mind. Travellers often report feeling as though the ridge stretches and bends more than it should, making distances seem longer than they are. A group of geology students from Texas A&M visiting in 1974 recounted how they saw headlights moving toward them in the early morning fog. When they tried to wave for help, the lights vanished before reaching them, leaving only silence and the faint echo of tyres on gravel. Local law enforcement has tried to keep detailed records, but the ridge's isolation makes investigations difficult. Sheriff James Whitaker, who patrolled the Blanco County area during the late 1970s, noted in his journal that several reports of missing vehicles were never resolved. In one instance, a delivery truck driven by a man named Henry Delgado simply failed to arrive in Marble Falls, and when deputies followed the route, the truck was nowhere to be found. The road has also been the site of unusual vehicle behaviour. Drivers frequently describe engines stalling for no reason, headlights flickering and radios cutting out entirely. In 1985, a teenager named Carla Simmons was driving with friends when all 4 tyres of her car deflated simultaneously on a straight section of the road. They were forced to walk for miles before reaching a small ranch, where locals claimed the area was known for stealing cars in a way that nobody could explain. Many who have survived the road's oddities describe a feeling of being watched. Hikers and cyclists on the adjacent trails sometimes hear footsteps or whispers behind them, only to find no one is there. A retired highway worker, Robert Kane, recounted in a 1992 interview how he once saw a black sedan parked at the edge of the ridge, headlights glowing with nobody inside. When he approached, the car was gone, leaving the road empty as if it had never existed. Paranormal investigators later speculated that the location's magnetic anomalies could interfere with human perception, but these theories remain untested and inconclusive. Local legends intertwine with these modern disappearances. Folklore speaks of a spirit known as La Larga Sombra, the Long Shadow, believed to wander the ridge at twilight. Some claim the shadow reaches out to travellers, leading them away from the road and into the thick woods below. Others tell of a Native American curse linked to an old burial ground near the spine, warning that anyone who ventures too far from the centre of the road risks vanishing. Despite the dangers, the Devil's Backbone continues to draw drivers, thrill seekers, and investigators. Tour guides sometimes take small groups during daylight, pointing out the spots where cars were last seen or where strange fog rolls in without explanation. But even those who approach cautiously report a sense of unease, a quiet that feels too heavy for an open landscape. A single curve, known locally as Widow's Bend, is particularly notorious. Travellers report a sudden drop in visibility and a chill that can freeze breath in mid-air, even in July. It is here that many disappearances are said to have occurred, and the bend has become a cautionary landmark in stories told across Texas. Those who have disappeared are never found, leaving only the road itself as a silent witness to countless mysteries. The Alaska Highway, Alaska. The Alaska Highway winds over 1,390 miles from Dawson Creek in British Columbia to Delta Junction in Alaska, crossing rugged mountains, dense forests, and frozen rivers. The road was originally constructed during World War II to connect the US and Canada to Alaska, but its remote stretches have become notorious for unexplained disappearances. Travellers report that long stretches of the highway can feel endless, with nothing but trees and snow on either side, creating a sense of isolation that can make even experienced drivers uneasy. In 1972, a family of 4 travelling from Fairbanks to Whitehorse vanished near Muncho Lake. Their blue Dodge van was found days later at the side of the highway, doors wide open, luggage scattered, and no sign of the family anywhere. Search parties combed the surrounding forest, using helicopters and dogs, but discovered no tracks or evidence to suggest what had happened. Drivers sometimes report hearing engines rev or tyres skid when no other vehicles are nearby. In 1984, a trucker named William Hensley described seeing headlights moving in the distance on a clear night. When he attempted to make contact with a horn or wave, the lights vanished completely, leaving only the sound of the wind through the spruce trees. Others have reported that the highway seems to stretch or shrink, with mile markers appearing to shift when driving alone, creating a disorienting experience that many describe as unnatural. Local authorities have kept records, but the highway's isolation and harsh conditions make investigations difficult. Sergeant Carl Thompson of the Alaska State Troopers noted that during his patrols in the early 1990s, several vehicles were found abandoned with personal belongings still inside. In one case, a camper van belonging to a man named Harold Peterson from Anchorage was discovered with the engine running and food laid out on the counter, as if he'd simply vanished into thin air. Many who've travelled the Alaska Highway describe a strange silence that falls over certain sections. Wildlife seems to disappear, and radios often cut out completely, leaving only static. A pair of biologists, Ellen and James Franks, recalled a journey in 1997 when their car stereo abruptly failed as they crossed the White River. They later discovered that the forest along that stretch appeared to have no tracks, as though the animals had vanished into the air. In 2005, a couple from Edmonton named Lisa and Mark Reynolds set out in the early afternoon. Witnesses reported seeing them drive into a patch of sunlight reflecting off a frozen lake near Kluane National Park. Minutes later, their car was gone, and only faint tyre marks remained, abruptly ending at the edge of the ice. Rescue teams scoured the area for weeks but found no trace of the couple or the vehicle. Legends have grown around the highway, blending modern reports with older stories from indigenous communities. Some Athabascan elders speak of a place where the spirits of the forest claim travellers who are unprepared for the wilderness. Others whisper that certain stretches of the road lead into parallel paths that exist alongside reality, swallowing anyone who ventures too far from the centre of the pavement. Even skeptics who drive the route alone report feelings of unease, as if the trees themselves are watching and the road refuses to lead them where they intend. Though fraught with hazards, the Alaska Highway remains a magnet for those craving adventure. Some drive slowly, observing the trees and frozen rivers, trying to spot anomalies or places where travellers have disappeared. Others travel in convoys, convinced that companionship might provide some protection against the unknown. Yet even with caution, reports of sudden vanishings and unexplained phenomena continue to surface, adding to the road's reputation as one of the most mysterious routes in the world. One area near Summit Lake is particularly feared. Drivers often report hearing faint voices or distant engines in the early morning fog, only to discover there is no one else on the road. This stretch has become a focal point for stories of disappearances, leaving those who drive it with a lingering sense of vulnerability and the feeling that the highway itself refuses to release what it takes. Travellers who enter the dense forest along the Alaska Highway may never return, leaving only empty roads and unanswered questions. The A75 Scotland. Across southern Scotland, the A75 travels from Gretna to Stranraer, meandering through farmland, forests and softly undulating hills. On the surface, it is just another rural highway, but locals whisper about strange occurrences that have plagued the road for decades. Travellers report sudden disappearances and vanishing vehicles, often in places where the landscape appears perfectly normal, leaving no explanation behind. The combination of winding turns and isolated stretches seems to create an atmosphere that unnerves even the most experienced drivers. A young couple, Andrew and Sheila Campbell, vanished near Creetown in the 1960s as they were driving home from Dumfries. Witnesses recalled seeing their small blue Austin crossing a narrow bridge, headlights glowing in the fog, but by the next morning the car had disappeared. Local police scoured the surrounding area using search dogs and helicopters, but found nothing. The case was never solved, and it became one of the first in a long line of unexplained vanishings along the road. Twisting and shifting in subtle ways, the road seems to toy with the minds of those who traverse it. Long, straight stretches suddenly curve or seem longer than expected. Drivers have reported the sun appearing to freeze in the sky, casting strange shadows that move unnaturally across the hills. In 1978, a trucker named Malcolm Fraser was transporting goods between Dumfries and Stranraer when he reported seeing a series of headlights approaching from the opposite direction. As he pulled to the side, the lights vanished completely, and the vehicles were never spotted again. Fraser later told reporters that the experience left him shaken for years. Fog and mist are common along the A75, and these weather conditions seem to coincide with many disappearances. In 1985, a group of hikers driving along the road recounted being enveloped in a dense mist that appeared without warning. Their car radio failed, and their GPS devices showed only blank screens. When the fog lifted, they found themselves several miles down the road, with no memory of how they had travelled that distance. Such incidents have fueled theories that parts of the highway act like a liminal space, shifting time or distance in ways that are impossible to measure. Dozens of unexplained incidents have been documented by police, but the road's isolation hampers their efforts. Sergeant Fiona MacLeod of Dumfries Police noted in a 1991 report that several vehicles were found abandoned with personal belongings left inside. In one case, a young man named Peter McCallum disappeared near Glenluce while driving a rented Ford Cortina. His car was discovered weeks later in a clearing, engine running and lights still on, yet there were no tracks leading to or from the location. A sense of unease affects even the most careful travellers. Pedestrians and cyclists sometimes hear footsteps or voices that disappear when they turn around. In 1997, a retired postman named Ewan Kerr claimed to see a group of figures walking along the road at dusk. As he approached, the group vanished without a trace, leaving only faint impressions in the gravel. Folklore suggests that these figures may be spirits of travellers lost long ago, and some locals avoid walking the A75 after dark entirely. Several areas along the road have earned a particularly sinister reputation. Near the village of Glenluce, a curve nicknamed the Whispering Bend is associated with multiple vanishings. Travellers report hearing whispers coming from the trees, often prompting them to stop or turn around. Many claim that they feel eyes watching from the surrounding forest, even when no one is visible. Tourists who pass through during daylight hours sometimes notice that the forest along the bend appears unnaturally dense, as if it is hiding more than just wildlife. Infamous though it may be, the A75 remains crucial for transportation, and drivers continue to traverse it without pause. Lorries, local commuters, and tourists all risk the isolation, sometimes encountering strange occurrences they cannot explain. Some carry cameras or recorders in the hope of capturing proof of the road's oddities, while others simply try to drive quickly through the foggy stretches. Regardless of preparation, the highway's history of disappearances continues to attract attention and fear in equal measure. One stretch just outside Stranraer is especially feared by locals. Travellers report a sudden silence, broken only by the sound of tyres on asphalt, followed by a sense of being drawn forward by something unseen. Many have emerged shaken, insisting they were moments away from vanishing into the dense forest. No one knows exactly what causes the strange events on the A75, and the road continues to swallow those who travel too close to its mysterious bends. Dyatlov Pass Road, Russia. The Dyatlov Pass Road is not a highway in the traditional sense, but a series of rugged trails leading through the northern Ural Mountains in Russia. It is most famous for the Dyatlov Pass incident of 1959, when 9 experienced hikers died under mysterious circumstances Over the years, travellers who attempt to navigate the trails in this region have reported strange vanishings, adding a modern layer of fear to an already infamous landscape. The area is remote, covered in dense forests, steep ridges and snowfields that can remain frozen for most of the year, making even a short journey treacherous. In 1968, a geologist named Vladimir Petrov set out along a less travelled section of the pass to study rock formations. He was last seen near the edge of the Kholat-Syakhl Ridge. Weeks later, a search team discovered his abandoned snowmobile half buried in snow, with footprints disappearing into the frozen forest. No further trace of Petrov was ever found. Locals began to speak of this stretch of the trail as the road that swallows people, and stories of disappearances became intertwined with the original Dyatlov mystery. Many who pass through the area say it feels unnaturally silent. In 1975, a group of forestry workers was transporting timber when they suddenly noticed their radios going dead. The fog that had settled across the pass thickened rapidly, and one worker, Ivan Kuznetsov, disappeared while checking on a fallen tree. His companions searched for hours but found only his gloves and a hat lying on the snow. Many who enter the trails report that visibility shifts in ways that make familiar landmarks disappear or appear out of place, causing even those with maps and compasses to become disoriented. Numerous incidents have been reported along the pass, yet the combination of treacherous terrain and harsh weather keeps investigators at bay. Sergeant Alexei Mikhailov, who patrolled the area during the 1980s, noted in reports that hikers and researchers sometimes vanish without leaving any signs of struggle. In 1983, a student team from Sverdlovsk State University attempted to map the forest near Otorten Mountain. Their tent was found torn apart, supplies untouched, but 3 students were missing. Search parties scoured the mountains for days, encountering no tracks leading to or from the campsite. The road and surrounding trails are known for sudden weather changes. Sunlight can vanish behind clouds in minutes, turning clear skies into whiteout conditions. In 1992, a photographer named Olga Smirnova ventured to capture the landscape near the pass. While taking pictures, she described feeling a heavy pressure, as if the air itself had thickened. Moments later, her guide, Sergei Ivanov, vanished while descending a small ridge. Olga escaped alone and later reported hearing faint voices carried by the wind, though no one else was nearby. Legends from local Mansi and Komi communities speak of spirits that guard the mountains and the forests. Some claim these spirits appear as shadows among the trees, leading travellers astray. Others describe glowing lights that hover over ridges and then disappear suddenly. Researchers have attempted to explain these phenomena through natural causes, such as infrasound or hallucinations caused by extreme cold, but no single theory has been able to account for the number of disappearances reported over decades. A persistent sense of observation accompanies many on the trails, even in areas isolated from others. Hikers in the late 1990s spoke of hearing footsteps that did not match their companions' movements, and some described shadows passing over snowfields that vanished before they can be investigated. A group of ski mountaineers in 1999 found the footprints of a lone person leading into a ravine, but no return path could be located. Stories like these have cemented the pass as one of the most dangerous and mysterious routes in the Ural Mountains. One particularly feared area is the ridge near Kholat-Syakhl, where many modern disappearances occur. Travellers often report a sudden drop in temperature and the sensation of movement in the trees around them, even when no wind blows. Locals advise avoiding the trail entirely during winter months, warning that it seems to take what it wants and will not release it easily. Even now, those who attempt the Dyatlov Pass road risk vanishing into the same forests that have swallowed countless others. Highway 22 Oregon. Through Oregon's Cascade Mountains, Highway 22 winds past dense forests, rivers, and isolated stretches where the trees loom close to the asphalt. The highway looks peaceful at first glance, but locals warn of long stretches where travellers simply vanish without a trace. Fog often rises from the valleys, curling through the trees and masking the road ahead, giving the sense that the forest itself has reached onto the highway. In 1979, a family from Salem was driving to a cabin near Detroit when their station wagon was spotted crossing a curve over the Santiam River Bridge. Hours later, the vehicle had disappeared entirely. Search teams combed the surrounding mountains and riverbanks, yet found no sign of the family. Their belongings remained untouched inside the car, and no footprints led away from the site. Stories of disappearances like this gave the highway a reputation as a place where ordinary journeys could end without explanation. Along some curves, drivers often experience unexpected moments of disorientation. In 1985, Thomas Keegan, a logging truck driver, recalled driving past Green Peter Reservoir when the road seemed to stretch endlessly, as if the landscape had shifted while he wasn't looking. His radio filled with static, and for a brief moment, his truck's headlights illuminated nothing but an empty stretch of asphalt. He later noticed that his map placed him miles away from where he thought he had been, a discrepancy he could not explain. The forest bordering Highway 22 are dense with firs, maples, and thick undergrowth that can hide more than wildlife. In 1993, a group of hikers from Eugene set off near the Niagara Falls overlook and never returned. Their campsite was intact, food and gear untouched, yet search teams found no footprints or paths leading away. Witnesses later reported hearing eerie, unidentifiable sounds coming from the forest that night, like whispers carried by the wind. Local rangers note that the area has treacherous hidden ravines and unstable slopes that can swallow anyone who wanders off the trail. The area around the overlook is notorious for fog and sudden drops in temperature, conditions that can make even experienced hikers feel lost and unsteady. The weather can change in seconds on Highway 22. In November 2001, motorcyclist Peter Lovett was caught in thick fog that appeared without warning. He heard the roar of an engine behind him, but no vehicle was visible. A short while later, a bend in the road opened to reveal a bridge that was not marked on his map. By the time he crossed it, the fog had lifted, and he was miles further along the highway than he remembered. Many drivers describe this same sensation of the road shifting under them, as if the curves and valleys have no fixed order. Officials have documented a significant number of vehicles left deserted along the highway. Deputy Linda Harris of Lynn County reported in 2005 that cars were sometimes found parked neatly on the shoulder, keys in place, but the occupants were gone. One man, Richard McCall, disappeared near Mill City after a short camping trip. His Jeep was discovered days later at the edge of a steep embankment, engine running, yet there were no tracks to indicate how he had left. People travelling Highway 22 at night often notice strange sounds or movements. Some have heard footsteps alongside their car, or voices carried on the wind when no one else was nearby. Others describe shadows darting between trees that vanish when approached. Locals tell travellers to keep to the main road, warning that straying onto side trails or stopping in isolated spots increases the risk of being drawn into the forest in ways no one can explain. A particularly feared stretch runs between Detroit and Santiam Pass, where the road climbs and curves through dense timber and fog-prone valleys. Travellers report sudden chills, the feeling of being watched, and in some cases vehicles disappearing only to reappear later with no explanation. The forest seems alive here, holding secrets that extend far beyond the reach of lights and radios. Highway 22 has a way of making the familiar feel strange, as if the forest itself decides who will continue along the road and who will never reach the next curve. The loneliest road, Nevada. On either side of US Route 50, the desert extends endlessly, interrupted only by distant ridges and sparse clumps of sagebrush. Driving along this highway feels different from any other road in America. Even during the day, the sun seems sharper, the shadows longer, and the wind carries a quiet that presses against the car like an invisible weight. Travellers sometimes describe a strange vibration in the air, almost like the desert is watching, and it is easy to understand why this stretch earned its ominous nickname. Fog and dust roll over the horizon without warning, blurring the line between sky and earth. A trucker named Carl Whitman once told locals that he could see a vehicle up ahead in the distance, only for it to vanish before he reached it, leaving tyre tracks in the sand that stopped abruptly. People passing through the same stretch report similar experiences: phantom headlights, echoes of engines that were never there, and the sudden disappearance of animals that had been grazing on the roadside moments before. The highway is quiet, but in its quietness every sound becomes sharper, every shadow a potential threat. Alongside the road, abandoned structures pepper the desert. Old motels and gas stations, some barely standing, evoke an eerie stillness. A local named Rosa Martinez recalls a gas station near Sand Mountain, where travellers claim to have checked in late at night but never left the premises. Others described the air inside as cold, even on sweltering summer nights, and sometimes faint music would play from rooms that had no occupants. These buildings seem to exist out of time, caught between past and present, and travellers rarely linger after witnessing something inexplicable. Even wildlife behaves oddly near the highway. Jackrabbits freeze in place as cars approach, only to vanish seconds later, and birds sometimes circle overhead in patterns that seem unnatural. In 1989, a group of campers reported seeing a herd of deer appear suddenly on the horizon and then disappear as they drew closer, leaving nothing but hoofprints in the sand. These small moments, easily dismissed, contribute to the creeping unease that so many associate with Route 50. The desert seems to provoke unusual feelings in travellers that science cannot fully explain. Drivers describe feeling a sudden heaviness in their limbs or a pull that makes it hard to keep control of the vehicle. Radios may sputter with static or emit faint, distorted voices, and GPS devices sometimes show locations that make no sense. One traveller, a geologist named Karen Ellis, spoke of a haze shimmering along the horizon that made distant hills appear impossibly close, before stretching them far away within minutes. The desert seems to bend reality along this highway, distorting both time and space. Disappearances are not limited to vehicles. Hikers and campers venturing too far from the road have been reported missing, leaving backpacks and supplies behind. In 1997, Patricia Owens vanished near a small inn outside Eureka. Her car remained in the lot, neatly parked, and her luggage sat on the passenger seat untouched. Locals whisper that certain stretches of Route 50 have hidden depressions and dunes that can swallow a person without leaving a trace, and that wandering even a few feet off the asphalt can mean the difference between life and disappearance. Nightfall brings a different kind of danger. The horizon darkens into a deep, infinite black, and stars glimmer overhead in a way that almost hypnotizes those who drive too long without rest. Travellers report hearing footsteps crunching behind them on the asphalt, voices carried on the wind that vanish when approached, and the unsettling sensation of being followed by something unseen. Some say the desert itself decides who may continue and who will be lost forever, testing patience and attention in ways no one fully understands. A certain feared stretch lies between Ely and Austin, where hills rise and fall like waves frozen in time. Drivers report sudden temperature drops and shadows moving independently of the moonlight. Vehicles have been discovered abandoned with no signs of struggle, sometimes miles from where they should have been. Even those who pass through cautiously describe a tension that lingers long after leaving the highway, a weight that seems to stick to the skin and the mind. Route 50 does not announce its dangers, nor does it leave warnings. Those who vanish along its endless stretches leave only the desert and the empty road to tell their story. Route 666, Arizona. Known as the Devil's Highway, Route 666 winds its way across northern Arizona's deserts. Its reputation isn't just folklore. Countless travellers have reported experiences that defy explanation. The road cuts through barren landscapes, red rock mesas, and stretches where nothing seems to move except the wind. Even in daylight, the emptiness can feel oppressive, as if the road itself watches every vehicle that dares to travel its path. Over the years, residents have shared accounts of lights that seem to hover just above the road. These aren't ordinary headlights or reflections. Witnesses speak of sudden, brilliant glows that appear and vanish without pattern, sometimes following vehicles for miles before disappearing altogether. In 1974, a trucker named Robert Larkin reported seeing a pair of glowing orbs hovering near his cab near the stretch outside Sanders. He swore the lights moved independently of the road and disappeared in a blink, leaving him shaken for hours. The highway is notoriously isolated. Between towns like Sanders, Holbrook, and Gallup, stretches of the road go on for miles without any sign of life. Drivers often report strange disorientation on these stretches, losing track of time or distance. Some have described entering a fog that comes without warning, rolling over the desert like a living thing. Witnesses claim that when the fog clears, familiar landmarks appear altered or missing entirely. Disappearances have been documented here for decades, although records are sparse. In 1986, a family of 4 vanished after travelling near the Navajo reservation, leaving their car abandoned with no indication of struggle or mechanical failure. Police investigations found no footprints or signs of the family nearby, and the case remains unsolved. Similar reports include long-haul truckers who vanish for days, only to reappear miles away with no memory of what happened. The FBI has occasionally cited the road in its reports on unexplained missing person cases in the region, highlighting its unusual pattern of vanishings. Even more puzzling, some vehicles are later found completely emptied of personal belongings, as if the occupants simply disappeared into thin air. Strange patterns in the weather seem connected to these occurrences. Monsoon storms sweep through the area, creating sudden flash floods and reducing visibility to almost nothing. Drivers recount feeling a peculiar sense of being watched or followed during storms, even when the road is empty. The combination of winding curves, sudden elevation changes, and desert isolation creates an atmosphere where disorientation can turn ordinary trips into terrifying experiences. Route 666 is also layered with history that contributes to its eerie reputation. Long before it received its infamous number, sections of this path were used by early miners and cattle drivers. Navajo and Hopi legends speak of spirits wandering the desert, especially along stretches of trail where travelers were known to vanish. Some locals claim these ancient warnings still resonate, manifesting as inexplicable phenomena along the modern highway. Those who drive the Devil's Highway often describe a sensation that defies logic. The road seems to stretch on endlessly, yet distances measured afterward don't match the time spent driving. Vehicles have been reported stopping inexplicably, engines failing without cause or GPS systems malfunctioning entirely. In rare cases, passing motorists have seen figures along the roadside, only for those shapes to vanish when approached. These events are scattered across years and decades, making the highway a patchwork of mysteries rather than a single isolated phenomenon. Police in the towns along the route are aware of the road's ominous reputation. Some officers refuse to drive the route at night unless necessary, citing too many unexplained reports over the years. Local newspapers occasionally print accounts from travellers, but many stories are filed away, quietly contributing to the road's growing legend. Despite this, the highway remains heavily travelled, a lifeline for commerce and tourism that continues to carry both the curious and the unwary through its desert stretches. For anyone venturing along Route 666, the desert's quiet can feel like a warning. Shadows shift without reason, lights appear and vanish, and time itself can seem unreliable. Some journeys end normally, while others leave questions that remain unanswered for decades. The Devil's Highway continues to hide its secrets, even under the harsh desert sun and across the endless pavement, according to those who traverse it. The Blue Ridge Parkway, North Carolina. The Blue Ridge Parkway winds through the Appalachian Mountains, a ribbon of asphalt that stretches over 469 miles between Virginia and North Carolina. Unlike busy highways, this road carries travelers through thick forests, rolling hills, and secluded overlooks, creating a sense of isolation even during the daytime. The mountains themselves seem to bend around the roadway, hiding curves and valleys that can confuse drivers and obscure vision in unexpected ways. Tourists and locals alike have reported experiences that defy explanation. Some speak of suddenly losing time, noticing hours have passed with no memory of the drive. In 1992, a couple visiting the Lincoln Viaduct recalled driving for what felt like 20 minutes, but found themselves miles from their previous location with no recollection of the route they had taken. These experiences are not isolated, and over the years, similar reports have trickled in from hikers and drivers along the Parkway. Fog often drifts through the mountains without warning, rolling over the trees and covering the road in thick grey clouds. Travellers describe a sensation of being swallowed by the mist, with headlights cutting through the haze only to reveal nothing but empty forest. Some motorists have claimed to see shadows moving alongside their vehicles or figures standing at the side of the road that vanish when approached. These fleeting glimpses are enough to unsettle even the most experienced drivers. The Parkway's history adds another layer of mystery. Construction began in 1935 as part of a New Deal project, and the road was completed in segments over decades. During its early years, labourers and engineers faced harsh weather and rugged terrain, and a number of workers reportedly disappeared in accidents or were never seen again. Local archives mention missing personnel from the 1940s whose disappearances were never fully explained, fueling the growing legend of the Parkway as more than just a scenic route. Wildlife along the road behaves strangely at times. Drivers have reported deer or other animals crossing in patterns that defy logic, disappearing into the woods in ways that make no sense. On rare occasions, hikers recount hearing voices or footsteps in areas where no one else is present, leaving them with the eerie impression that the forest itself is watching. Even experienced rangers admit that some stretches of the Parkway feel different after dark, with ambient sounds and movements that can't be accounted for by ordinary wildlife. Several specific curves and stretches of road have earned notoriety. The area near Richland Balsam, the Parkway's highest point at over 6,000 feet, is a frequent site of unusual sightings. In 2001, a delivery driver reported seeing a van appear on the road ahead, only for it to vanish completely around a bend, leaving no trace of skid marks or other signs of a vehicle having been there. Such incidents are rare, but consistent enough that locals warn visitors to stay alert, especially during periods of low visibility. The oddities along the Parkway are often amplified by the changing weather and rugged topography. Sudden temperature drops, unexpected rain, and swirling winds combine with the road's twists and turns, creating conditions where perception can be easily distorted. Travellers report that familiar landmarks can appear in places they don't belong, and distances seem inconsistent with the time taken to traverse them. These experiences are documented in Parkway visitor logs, where staff note unusual entries without attempting to explain them. Behind the Parkway's picturesque views lies an ever-present undercurrent of mystery and unease. Hikers often discover abandoned campsites with belongings left behind, sometimes with no indication of who was there or why they left so suddenly. Drivers encounter empty pull-offs where cars appear deserted, and in a few rare cases the occupants are never found. These instances have contributed to a reputation that goes beyond scenic charm, making some stretches feel alive in ways that are difficult to describe. The road's quiet majesty can deceive travellers into thinking they are alone, yet the Parkway seems to hold secrets in every bend and forested ridge. Each trip along its curves carries the possibility of seeing something inexplicable, leaving questions that linger long after the journey ends. At present, those who traverse the Blue Ridge Parkway speak in hushed tones about moments that cannot be explained, as if the mountains themselves remember what happens on the winding road. The M6 Motorway, England. Morning fog rolled over the motorway, thick and heavy, swallowing everything in its path and making even familiar roads feel unrecognisable. Stephen Holden gripped the steering wheel as the fog thickened around his lorry, the morning light barely cutting through the grey curtain. By the time he realised he had passed the Shap summit, he was unsure how far he had travelled. Hours seemed to vanish, yet his odometer suggested only minutes had passed. Holden was not alone in experiencing the motorway's strange anomalies, though few reports make it into official records. The M6 stretches from the West Midlands up to the Scottish border, a lifeline connecting industrial towns and major cities. While it appears ordinary to most, its northern sections near Cumbria and Lancashire have earned quiet notoriety. Travellers often speak of shadows that flicker at the edge of vision and sudden gaps in memory that cannot be explained by fatigue or distraction. Motorway patrol officers have occasionally noted reports of missing vehicles, abandoned yet mechanically sound, with occupants never accounted for. One night in 2003, a commuter named Laura Thompson recounted a drive near Penrith, where the headlights of a car ahead seemed to vanish and reappear intermittently. Each time she blinked or adjusted her gaze, the vehicle would either be closer than expected or gone entirely. She pulled over to a lay-by, shaken, only to see the taillights appear in the distance again, as though the road itself had moved the car. Incidents like these are rare, but patterns over decades suggest the motorway holds secrets beyond normal explanation. These unexplained events appear most vividly when fog blankets the road and the weather turns unpredictable. During winter, icy patches appear with little warning, and sudden gusts of wind along elevated sections near the Lake District can unsettle even heavy vehicles. Drivers report that these conditions amplify disorientation. Some claim that familiar junctions seem to shift location in fog or rain, making the journey feel longer or shorter than it should. Emergency services occasionally receive calls from panicked motorists who insist something invisible is interfering with their path. Local authorities have occasionally recorded GPS malfunctions along this stretch where devices suddenly jump miles ahead or lose signal entirely, adding to driver confusion. The motorway's history adds another layer of mystery. Constructed in segments from the 1950s through the 1970s, the M6 followed older roads and ancient pathways that predate modern infrastructure. Workers faced treacherous terrain, harsh weather, and occasional accidents that were not fully documented. Local folklore now ties the energy of these early struggles to the inexplicable vanishings of vehicles and travellers today, although such connections remain speculative. Even routine stops along the motorway can carry an unsettling atmosphere. Service stations at night sometimes appear deserted, yet cars, half-filled and recently occupied, suggest recent activity. In 1997, a delivery van was discovered at a lay-by near Lancaster, doors unlocked and engine warm, with no driver in sight. Law enforcement found no traces of the missing person, leaving only questions and a growing sense of unease about certain stretches of the road. In some cases, cars have been found with personal items untouched inside, yet occupants vanished as if the road itself had swallowed them. Psychological and environmental factors intertwine on the M6. Its curves, gradients and stretches flanked by dense woodland create optical illusions that can trick even attentive drivers. Repeated reports of drivers feeling followed or hearing indistinct sounds are difficult to dismiss entirely. Some speculate that the road itself, its atmosphere, and the human mind's reaction to isolation may contribute to experiences that feel entirely real yet remain unexplained. Witnesses also report hearing faint engine sounds or distant voices when no other vehicles are nearby, an auditory illusion that leaves a lingering sense of unease. Motorists and locals alike acknowledge that certain sections of the M6 are approached with caution, particularly after dark or during early morning fog. Stories circulate quietly at service stations, truck stops, and among driving instructors, each retelling adding to the lore of the motorway. Despite heavy traffic and careful monitoring, the northern stretches retain a quiet menace, a sense that ordinary travel can suddenly become extraordinary and unsettling. Fleeting sights and unusual feelings appear along the road and vanish just as quickly, their mysteries remaining even now. Kolyma Highway, Russia. The wind cut across the Kolyma Highway like a blade, carrying snow in jagged sheets that stung exposed skin. Temperatures here often fall below -40°C, and the frozen landscape stretches endlessly, broken only by occasional clusters of birch trees or abandoned structures from the Soviet era. Drivers navigating this road describe a sense of isolation unlike anywhere else, as if the highway itself is a trap designed to swallow all who dare to travel it. While delivering supplies to a remote mining settlement in 1998, a trucker named Igor Petrov disappeared near the outskirts of Susuman. His rig was later found on the roadside, engine running, cargo intact, but with no sign of him. Authorities speculated about hypothermia or an accident, yet no tracks led away from the vehicle, leaving locals to whisper that the highway sometimes takes people without leaving a trace. Petrov's disappearance is one among dozens documented over decades along this route, earning the road its grim nickname, the Road of Bones. Some travellers report seeing ghostly figures walking along the roadside, vanishing when approached, as if the highway preserves echoes of those who perished during construction. The highway's construction adds a chilling layer to its reputation. Built under Stalin in the 1930s, it relied on forced labour from the Gulag system, where prisoners endured brutal cold, starvation and gruelling work. Thousands perished during the construction, and their graves are scattered along the road's length. Some travellers claim that these deaths left a residual energy, a presence that can be felt in the howling wind or the silence that descends over stretches where the snow is deepest. Navigating the Kolyma Highway demands constant vigilance. In winter, snowdrifts can cover lanes completely, and whiteout conditions can appear without warning, erasing any sense of direction. Truckers recount losing sight of other vehicles, only to see them reappear miles ahead, as if the road has shifted in space or time. Even locals familiar with every turn and ridge admit that the highway can be disorienting and psychologically taxing, with days passing unnoticed when travel becomes a battle against the elements. Beyond the cold, environmental hazards are unpredictable. Ice fractures underweight in some areas, forming hidden crevices that can swallow tyres. Wolves and bears, rare but present, are sometimes glimpsed along the roadside, their eyes reflecting headlights in the dark. Travellers tell of hearing strange noises, footsteps crunching over frozen earth, whispering winds carrying human voices, yet finding nothing when they investigate. The combination of isolation, cold, and these inexplicable occurrences has made the road a subject of fear and respect. In addition, abandoned vehicles from decades past are occasionally discovered buried under snowdrifts, as if the highway slowly reclaims anything left behind. Often, people vanish without a clear reason or explanation. In 2005, a group of geologists travelling to a remote research station vanished near the Kulu River crossing. Their vehicles were discovered days later, partially buried in snow, with personal belongings left behind as if abandoned in haste. No signs of struggle were found, and search teams reported sudden storms that hampered investigation, as though the environment itself conspired to erase evidence. These incidents have fostered legends that the highway is alive in some way, claiming travellers who underestimate its dangers. Historical accounts also feed into the road's unsettling nature. During the Soviet era, the highway was considered a lifeline to the Far East, yet many supply convoys never reached their destinations. Letters and diaries recovered from abandoned settlements speak of treacherous ice, frostbite, and travellers who simply disappeared overnight. Even today, certain stretches are avoided during the harshest months, with drivers relying on satellite tracking and local advice to minimise risk. Psychologically, the Kolyma highway exerts a subtle pressure on those who traverse it. The vast emptiness, broken only by distant ridges and the endless white horizon, creates a feeling of vulnerability. Travellers describe hallucinations, distorted perception of distances, and moments where time seems to slow or stretch unnaturally. Some attribute these experiences to extreme cold and fatigue, yet the consistency of reports over decades suggests the highway has effects that go beyond ordinary hardship. Silent stretches along the road of bones carry the whispered stories of the lost, and even now, those who journey it remain wary of the miles ahead. The Pacific Coast Highway, California. The roar of waves hitting the cliffs below carried over the asphalt as headlights cut through the early morning fog on the Pacific Coast Highway. Salty air mingled with the scent of wet earth and pine, creating a strange tension between beauty and danger. Drivers along certain stretches near Big Sur often speak of sudden shadows crossing the road, figures that disappear before they can be identified. Even experienced motorists feel a fleeting unease, as if the cliffs themselves are hiding something just beyond sight. Near Ragged Point in 2007, a rental car was found abandoned, its doors left unlocked and personal items still inside. Locals and authorities searched the surrounding area, but found no trace of the occupants. Witnesses claim that some drivers reported seeing the car still moving slowly along the highway moments after it had been discovered parked. The disappearance remains unexplained, and stories like this have woven themselves into the region's lore. Several hikers in the area have reported hearing distant voices calling for help, only to find no one nearby when they investigate. As it follows the jagged coast of California, the highway reveals stunning views, yet the path remains perilous for those who travel it. Steep drops, narrow shoulders, and hairpin turns make navigation challenging, particularly in fog or rain. Erosion along certain cliffs has created sudden gaps in the road over the decades, some of which were only discovered after vehicles nearly went over the edge. Maintenance crews note that the land seems to shift unpredictably, a reminder of how volatile the coastline can be. Abandoned cars have occasionally been found partially hidden in brush or along cliff edges, with no explanation for how they came to rest there. The surrounding community's stories give the cliffs and curves of the highway an unsettling reputation. Fishermen, hikers, and residents have told stories for generations of travellers who vanish near Devil's Slide and other remote sections. Some speak of phantom figures standing at the roadside or glimpses of people on cliff edges who are gone when approached. Legends often describe unusual lights over the ocean or along the road at night, and while scientists attribute some sightings to natural phenomena, others remain difficult to explain. Driving the highway often leaves tourists feeling as though hours have slipped by unnoticed. Long stretches pass with nothing but curves, fog, and the sound of the ocean, creating a sense of timelessness. In 2012, a group of friends reported driving for nearly an hour without encountering another vehicle, only to emerge from a fog bank miles from where they believed they had entered it. Such experiences suggest that the highway's combination of geography and weather can distort perception in ways that feel almost supernatural. Accidents and disappearances along the Pacific Coast Highway are often linked to sudden environmental changes. Fog can roll in quickly from the ocean, obscuring vision entirely within moments. Landslides, rockfalls, and high winds are frequent, particularly near Big Sur, and drivers sometimes find vehicles abandoned after being forced off the road or stranded. Law enforcement records include several cases where cars were found intact with no sign of the driver, echoing earlier reports of unexplained vanishings. In 2015, a couple reported seeing a figure standing on a cliff near Hurricane Point, but when they returned with authorities, the spot was empty and undisturbed. Not even daylight prevents the strange phenomena reported along this coastal route. Sharp turns and twisting curves make it easy to lose visual reference points, and the sheer cliffs alongside the highway amplify a sense of vertigo. Travellers report glimpses of shadows at the edge of their vision, distorted reflections in mirrors, or the feeling of being followed even when the road appears empty. Some psychologists suggest that the combination of beauty, danger, and isolation can heighten the mind's sensitivity to unusual stimuli, though this does not explain every reported incident. The highway's cultural significance also adds to its mystique. Artists, writers, and filmmakers have long been drawn to the route for its dramatic scenery and powerful atmosphere. Tales of disappearances and strange sightings have inspired books, local stories, and cautionary advice shared among travellers. Some sections of the road are considered so dangerous that locals avoid them entirely after dark, while others drive the route repeatedly, drawn by curiosity and the thrill of the unknown. Marine foghorns and the distant crash of waves sometimes create the illusion of approaching vehicles or footsteps, adding to the road's eerie reputation. On the Pacific Coast Highway, whispers persist about times when the familiar road seems to alter reality, leaving travellers with questions as the cliffs disappear into the fog. The Trans-Canada Highway, Alberta. A heavy mist hung over the Trans-Canada Highway as dawn broke near Banff, blurring the outlines of the Rockies and swallowing familiar landmarks. Drivers speak of moments when the road seems to stretch endlessly, and distant headlights appear only to vanish before reaching them. Even those accustomed to winter conditions report feelings of disorientation, as if the highway itself can bend perception and play tricks on the mind. A family driving from Calgary to Jasper vanished near Kicking Horse Pass in 2010. Their SUV was later found abandoned at a pull-out, engine running and belongings untouched. Search teams scoured the surrounding area for days, but no trace of the family was ever recovered. Locals recount seeing their vehicle pass the same curve multiple times, then suddenly disappear from view, feeding the highway's reputation for unexplained vanishings. Some hikers in the surrounding mountains reported hearing faint cries that could not be traced to any person or animal, intensifying fears about that stretch of road. Carving its way through Canada's rugged wilderness, the highway presents steep passes, dense woodlands, and abrupt drops that can catch travellers off guard. Avalanches and rock slides are common hazards, particularly along the eastern slopes of the Rockies, and the combination of fog and snow can make even experienced drivers uneasy. Park rangers and maintenance crews often report signs of vehicles abruptly leaving the road, as though the environment itself shifts under wheels. In certain areas, old guardrails remain bent or twisted, evidence of accidents that were never fully explained or documented. At every hour, visitors report a strange emptiness, as if the surrounding landscape has vanished into nothingness. Long stretches pass with no other cars, only the sound of wind through pine trees and the occasional call of a raven. Motorists have reported glimpsing shadowy figures near the tree line, which vanish when approached, and hearing footsteps along empty pullouts. Some psychologists suggest that the monotony of these stretches combined with extreme conditions may heighten perception, though it fails to explain the number of vehicles discovered abandoned with no occupants. Apart from that, travellers have noticed sudden temperature drops localised to specific curves, leaving frost on windshields even in otherwise mild weather. Historically, the Trans-Canada Highway was completed in 1962, connecting Alberta to the rest of the country and facilitating commerce and tourism. Its construction required cutting through difficult mountain terrain, with early crews often facing extreme weather and avalanches. Older local tales tell of travellers who vanished during the initial years of operation, some of whom were never found. These stories have become part of the regional consciousness, a warning that the highway, while vital, can be unforgiving. Hazardous conditions can arise on the highway, even under the summer sun. Sudden thunderstorms roll off the mountains, reducing visibility to near zero in moments. Drivers have recounted instances of wildlife crossing without warning elk, deer, and sometimes bears, forcing abrupt manoeuvres that leave no trace of what just occurred. In several cases, vehicles have been found abandoned after encounters with wildlife, though in other instances occupants simply disappeared, leaving cars intact on the roadside. Ranger reports also mention finding tracks in the mud that abruptly stop mid-trail, as if whoever made them vanished into thin air. The psychological effects of the highway are subtle but persistent. Travellers speak of a creeping sense of vertigo, along curves and elevated stretches, and moments when distances appear longer or shorter than expected. Some report seeing distant headlights approach and then vanish, or hearing voices in the wind that cannot be located. These experiences leave many drivers wary, adding tension even on familiar routes and reinforcing the highway's mysterious reputation. The people living along the route have long learned to respect the Trans-Canada Highway's capricious nature. Lodges, truck stops and ranger stations are often filled with whispered warnings about certain passes, especially during winter or periods of dense fog. Stories of vanished travellers are shared quietly, as if saying them aloud might somehow attract misfortune. Even with modern technology, GPS trackers and radio communication, some stretches remain areas where disappearance seems all too possible. Satellite imagery has occasionally revealed vehicles parked in impossible positions along cliff edges, with no visible path leading to them. As they drive along its cliffs, motorists still encounter stretches that seem almost conscious, whispering stories of those who disappeared. The curve of Screaming Island. Thick fog often blankets the curve of Screaming, rolling off the nearby hills and settling over the asphalt. The road itself twists sharply, flanked by steep embankments and hidden ditches that can appear without warning. Erosion over decades has created uneven surfaces, and loose rocks often tumble from the cliffs above, leaving drivers to navigate not only the bend, but sudden obstacles that seem to appear out of nowhere. Records show a disturbing pattern. Since the 1970s, several vehicles have been found abandoned along the curve, their occupants never located. In 1984, a car was discovered pressed against the guardrail with personal belongings intact, yet no trace of the driver existed. Law enforcement notes multiple similar cases over the years, often occurring under similar weather conditions, suggesting more than mere accident might be at play. The road's design itself contributes to its danger. The bend is sharper than typical warning signs indicate, and visibility is limited due to the surrounding hills. Rain and ice can make the asphalt slick, and guardrails are often insufficient to prevent vehicles from sliding off in adverse conditions. Engineers who have studied the curve remark that the combination of gradient, turn radius, and frequent fog creates a rare set of conditions that can confuse drivers' spatial perception. Accident investigation reports indicate that some vehicles found along the curve showed no signs of braking, even in areas where sudden obstacles appeared. Officials have documented instances of tyre tracks that abruptly stop mid-road or veer in impossible angles, suggesting unknown forces at play. Traffic sensors installed in the early 2000s occasionally registered cars passing at speeds far above limits, yet local witnesses reported no vehicles during those times. These anomalies continue to puzzle authorities and reinforce the road's eerie reputation. Local folklore adds another dimension to the curve's ominous reputation. Stories passed down for generations speak of phantom figures appearing near the bend and the echoes of screams carried by the wind. Villagers claim that lights sometimes appear in the mist, moving along the road without an identifiable source, only to vanish when approached. These accounts, while anecdotal, have become a cultural warning, reinforcing the road's status as a site where normal rules seem suspended. Photographic evidence collected by local photographers over decades reveals faint shapes or distortions in images taken near the curve, often appearing only when fog is present. Newspapers from the 1980s and 1990s recount multiple reports of drivers seeing lights in unusual patterns, sometimes synchronized with disappearances. Some roadside memorials contain dates and names of victims spanning more than 50 years, a tangible reminder that the curve has haunted the region for generations. This combination of physical artifacts and anecdotal reports maintains a pervasive sense of unease for anyone travelling the road. Patterns of disappearances show unusual clustering. Certain sections of the curve are disproportionately linked to incidents, and they often occur during sudden weather changes, particularly heavy fog or rainfall. Vehicles have been found abandoned at odd angles or partially off the road, sometimes in areas where no skid marks are present. These repeated anomalies suggest that something about this location interacts unpredictably with the environment, creating conditions that are difficult to explain scientifically. Historical context highlights how the curve has evolved over time. Originally part of a rural route connecting nearby villages, it was widened in the 1960s to accommodate modern traffic. Older maps show that the terrain around the curve has always been unstable, with landslides recorded in the early 20th century. The accumulation of structural and geological changes over decades may contribute to the current pattern of vanishings and near misses. Environmental observations point to subtle but significant hazards. The surrounding hills can trap cold air, causing ice to form even on otherwise dry days. Trees and shrubs near the edge of the road obscure drivers' peripheral vision, and wind patterns funneled through the valley can shift suddenly, affecting vehicle control. These natural factors, when combined with human error or inattention, create a situation where accidents may escalate into disappearances more easily than on ordinary roads. The curve of screaming continues to fascinate, its beauty intertwined with a dark history that clings to every bend, making travellers wonder what lies shrouded in the fog. Route 138, Quebec. The road stretches endlessly along Quebec's northern shore, flanked by thick spruce forests and the cold, restless waters of the St. Lawrence River. Early morning fog often rolls in from the river, wrapping the highway in a grey blanket so dense that even familiar landmarks vanish. Headlights pierce through the mist in brief, shifting beams, revealing patches of frost on the asphalt that can freeze a car in place. Travellers sometimes notice the sudden silence, broken only by the soft rustle of distant wildlife, as if the road itself is holding its breath. In the 1960s, local newspapers reported several mysterious vanishings along Route 138. Truck drivers carrying supplies between Quebec City and the Côte-Nord region sometimes failed to reach their destinations, and despite searches, no trace of the drivers could be found. Families described last seeing their loved ones at roadside diners or gas stations, only for them to disappear in stretches where the road seems most ordinary. Police records from the 1970s note that abandoned vehicles appeared at random points, often with personal belongings left neatly inside, as though the occupants had vanished into thin air. In some cases, search teams reported finding tyre tracks that led into dense forested areas but vanished abruptly, leaving no trace of the vehicles or their occupants. Weather patterns along the highway are notoriously unpredictable. A stretch that is clear at dawn can be blanketed in heavy fog an hour later, while sudden rainstorms can turn the road into a mirror of wet asphalt. Ice patches form without warning on bridges and in low-lying valleys, and the river winds so close in certain sections that cold gusts can sweep across the pavement, chilling travellers to the bone. Even experienced locals often pause or slow their vehicles in these conditions, admitting that the road can behave in ways that defy expectation. Some of the oddest accounts involve vehicles that seem to appear or disappear inexplicably. In one documented case from 1983, a car was found in perfect condition on a roadside pullout, yet the driver was missing. GPS trackers in later decades occasionally show impossible routes, indicating vehicles moving along stretches of road where no map exists. These anomalies contribute to the road's eerie reputation, drawing curiosity from both researchers and thrill seekers who travel its remote stretches. Officials have occasionally found personal belongings, wallets, coats, or cell phones, left neatly inside vehicles, as if the occupants simply vanished without moving a step. Stories from nearby towns blend folklore with documented events. Residents speak of faint, moving lights in the forest lining the highway, which some believe lure travellers off the road. Others tell of sounds, distant footsteps or whispers that vanish when approached. Memorials for missing persons stand beside quiet stretches, simple crosses marking the unknown, and locals pass stories from generation to generation as warnings to newcomers. These tales exist alongside official records, reinforcing the unsettling character of the road. Travellers have reported strange sensations while driving Route 138. Some describe feeling as if time stretches or compresses, a disorientation heightened by dense fog, or the monotony of long, empty stretches. Others speak of a sudden heaviness, as though the air itself presses down, making movement feel sluggish. These experiences, while anecdotal, are consistent enough to form a pattern that adds to the road's mystique, creating a subtle tension that grows with each mile travelled. Environmental surveys show that the highway passes through areas shaped by glacial deposits and river sediments, creating uneven surfaces and sudden dips. Wildlife crossings are frequent, with moose and deer appearing without warning in the road's fog-shrouded curves. Some of the abandoned vehicles bear signs of abrupt evasive manoeuvres, yet no tracks lead away from the road, leaving investigators puzzled. Seasonal shifts in wind and temperature further create unpredictable microclimates along the route, amplifying the risk for anyone travelling alone. Some abandoned vehicles show evidence of sudden steering manoeuvres or abrupt stops, yet no footprints or animal tracks lead away from them, adding to the mystery of how drivers disappear. Even as maps mark Route 138 as a simple connector between towns, the highway continues to hold its secrets. Sudden fog, abandoned vehicles, and vanished travellers create a tension that hangs over the asphalt like a quiet warning. The Tunel de la Muerte, Chile. Mist clings to the jagged peaks of the Andes as Route 60 narrows into the Tunel de la Muerte. The entrance looms like a black mouth carved into stone, and the air inside carries a damp metallic tang. Drips from the rock ceiling strike the asphalt rhythmically, echoing softly in the stillness, as if counting time in a place where it does not move normally. Drivers report an odd weight in the air, a sensation that even the engine's hum cannot cut through. Construction of the tunnel began in the 1930s, meant to link Santiago with towns deeper in the Andes. Early engineers recorded that the rock was unstable, prone to sudden shifts, yet the tunnel was completed with minimal reinforcement. Over decades, small landslides inside the passage created unpredictable obstacles, sometimes forcing vehicles to swerve suddenly. Journalists in the 1950s noted that even seasoned truck drivers treated the route with caution, aware that the mountains themselves seemed to resist human control. Strange occurrences are scattered throughout the tunnel's history. In one 1967 report, a bus carrying passengers disappeared from the northern entrance. Its headlights were still on when the bus was found stalled inside, but every passenger had vanished. There were no footprints, no signs of escape, and even search dogs refused to enter the area for hours. Other abandoned vehicles were discovered with belongings left meticulously inside, suggesting sudden, unexplained vanishings rather than accidents or foul play. In some cases, witnesses reported hearing muffled voices or engine sounds inside the tunnel long after the vehicles had vanished, though no one could locate their source. The tunnel seems to alter perception in subtle ways. Some drivers describe lights ahead that shift unexpectedly, shadows that move counter to logic, or a feeling of motion without actual travel. Travellers have spoken of time stretching or folding in the space between walls, with minutes feeling like hours as fog drifts through the narrow corridor. GPS devices sometimes register impossible coordinates, sending vehicles along routes that do not exist. The combination of natural hazards and inexplicable phenomena creates a tension that tightens with every mile. Rain, snow, and ice add another layer of danger. Water trickles through cracks, forming slick sheets that mirror headlights. In winter, snowdrifts partially block side paths, forcing cars to hug the centre. Winds funnel through the tunnel, creating gusts strong enough to nudge vehicles toward the walls. Occasionally, falling rocks block the road entirely, forcing travellers to stop mid-tunnel and wait, unsure of what may come next. Maintenance crews occasionally find tyre tracks that abruptly stop in the middle of the tunnel, as if cars had simply lifted off the road or disappeared into the walls. Local legends persist alongside these reports. Villagers tell of a shadowy figure that appears near the northern entrance, vanishing as quickly as it arrives. Whispers of ghostly passengers or drivers who never left their vehicles mingle with memories of real disappearances. Families place small crosses and tokens along the approach to commemorate loved ones, and travellers are often warned against entering alone. Even those who scoff at superstition admit a peculiar unease while passing through. Investigators who examine the tunnel notice patterns without explanations. Abrupt swerves and sudden stops leave tyre marks, but no tracks continue beyond the tunnel's exit. Personal items, coats, wallets, backpacks, remain untouched inside some vehicles, as if the occupants vanished into another dimension. Attempts to analyse traffic or geological data yield few answers. The tunnel resists categorisation, It is neither fully natural hazard nor wholly supernatural, but something in between. Some abandoned vehicles show signs of sudden acceleration or abrupt braking despite the road being clear, adding to the puzzling nature of the disappearances. At night, the tunnel becomes a corridor of shadows and echoes, where every sound carries unnaturally far. Headlights catch droplets in mid-air, forming fleeting glimmers like fireflies trapped in mist. A sudden gust can extinguish a car's lights briefly, leaving the driver in darkness so complete it feels alive. Maps mark the Tunel de la Muerte as just another connector in Chile's mountain roads, but for those who travel it, it is anything but ordinary. The Tunel de la Muerte retains its enigmas even now, where the interplay of shadow, lost travellers, and changing light makes the road seem impossible to fully comprehend. Highway 61, Minnesota. The asphalt of Highway 61 cuts through Minnesota like a dark vein, tracing the edge of the Mississippi River and threading past sleepy towns and endless stretches of forest. From above, the road seems ordinary, but maps cannot capture the whispers of those who vanish along it. Travellers enter a stretch near Wabasha or Lake City and sometimes never emerge, leaving cars idling, engines running as if the road itself has claimed them. Patterns emerge when the incidents are examined more closely. Historical reports dating back decades describe similar scenarios. Individuals disappear mid-journey, leaving personal items undisturbed, without evidence of foul play. In the 1970s, one case involved a man whose vehicle remained parked by the roadside for days, keys still in the ignition, while police could find no trace of him in the surrounding woods. These disappearances are sporadic yet persistent enough to attract attention from both locals and law enforcement. The surrounding landscape contributes to the unease. Dense woodlands crowd the highway in irregular patches, creating long, shadowed corridors where sunlight barely penetrates. In certain sections, the trees seem to bend closer to the road, forming a natural tunnel that muffles sound. Wind currents shift oddly here, carrying an unsettling quiet. Even animals avoid these stretches, leaving the forest almost unnaturally still. Fog is a constant companion, often appearing without warning. Morning mist rising from the Mississippi can thicken in minutes, reducing visibility to a few feet. Observers note that even when the road appears clear, strange phenomena sometimes follow. Headlights flicker, distant engine sounds seem to vanish mid-air, and the silence feels heavier than ordinary isolation. This foggy atmosphere amplifies a sense of dislocation, as if the road itself warps perception. The Mississippi River and nearby wetlands add another layer of mystery to Highway 61. Seasonal flooding shifts the landscape, creating hidden pools and soft ground where evidence can vanish without a trace. Search parties often find themselves struggling through marshy terrain that swallows footprints and tire marks. During certain times of year, the river produces a low, hollow sound that carries across the road, adding an almost unnatural sense of presence to the surrounding forest. These environmental factors make it difficult to determine whether a disappearance is due to natural hazards or something more unexplained. Vehicles have been found abandoned under baffling circumstances. Engines left running, doors unlocked, and personal belongings intact suggest no hasty departures. Tyre tracks occasionally lead off the road and disappear into dense forest. In some searches, dogs brought in to track scents refuse to advance, hesitating at invisible boundaries. These occurrences hint at forces or conditions that defy easy explanation. Local history adds another layer of intrigue. Folklore speaks of the highway swallowing travellers, though the stories vary by decade. Some claim the incidents are warnings, others see them as cautionary tales passed down across generations. Newspapers from the 1980s to the 2000s sporadically report vehicles found empty under strange circumstances. The continuity of these accounts, despite changes in local culture and infrastructure, keeps the road wrapped in uncertainty. Even ordinary hazards complicate the mystery. Black ice, sudden drops in temperature, and deer crossings are real dangers. Yet disappearances occur in conditions that appear safe, without mechanical failure or weather events. Experts studying missing person cases along Highway 61 find these incidents difficult to classify, as if the road itself manipulates both environment and perception to conceal its secrets. As night falls, the highway takes on a different character. Streetlights in small towns cast faint reflections over the Mississippi, while other stretches vanish into darkness. engines hum across the asphalt, echoing faintly against the nearby trees. Occasionally, drivers notice shadows moving against the periphery of vision or a sound that seems to come from nowhere. The quiet is thick, tangible, as though the landscape itself is aware of its own hidden histories. There is a subtle tension that lingers long after a traveller leaves Highway 61. Even miles from the road, memories of the strange stillness and unexplained occurrences cling. The combination of isolation, dense forest, shifting weather, and unaccounted vanishings makes the highway both a route and a mystery. And somewhere along the river, where fog rolls over the asphalt, the road seems to wait, holding secrets that remain just out of reach. The Ghost Road, Japan. The Ghost Road winds through a remote section of Niigata Prefecture, disappearing into hills covered with dense bamboo and cedar forests. From above, the path appears simple, but travellers know it is anything but ordinary. The road narrows suddenly in places, curving sharply through mist-filled valleys where the sunlight barely reaches the asphalt. Archival records trace a series of mysterious disappearances beginning in the 1960s. A driver travelling alone near the town of Murakami in 1968 was reported missing after entering the road at dusk. His car was later found parked on the roadside with no signs of struggle. Local police documented that nothing in the surrounding forest suggested a human presence, and no clues explained where he went. The case became part of a growing list of mysteries associated with this stretch. The geography of the region adds to the road's eerie reputation. Hills rise sharply on both sides, channeling wind and fog into the valley where the road lies. Heavy rains can turn small streams into fast-moving torrents, and sudden landslides have altered sections of the asphalt. Even without disappearances, drivers report feeling an odd disorientation as they navigate the tight bends. Vehicles have vanished even during broad daylight. A truck driver in 1982 vanished while transporting supplies, leaving his fully loaded vehicle parked on a straight stretch of road. Witnesses from nearby villages reported that the area seemed unnaturally quiet that afternoon, as if even birds and insects had vanished along with the driver. The forests surrounding the ghost road are dense and difficult to search. Cedar trees grow closely together, their thick canopies blocking sunlight and muffling sound. Trails that might offer access to the road are overgrown, and steep slopes prevent easy movement. Search teams have sometimes spent hours combing these hills only to find nothing. The region's folklore adds another layer of suspense. Villagers speak quietly of spirits inhabiting the hills, guiding or drawing travellers away. Stories describe cars drifting off the road without impact and pedestrians simply vanishing on foggy nights. While these tales are unverified, the persistence of the legends across generations lends a cultural weight to the road's reputation. Even those who do not believe in spirits admit to a creeping unease when navigating its curves. Technology has not clarified the mystery. GPS devices sometimes fail in patches along the ghost road, showing signal loss where coverage should be strong. Cell phones become unreliable in certain valleys, cutting off communication unexpectedly. Investigators note that these technical anomalies coincide with many of the reported disappearances, though no causal link has been established. The combination of natural and technological factors leaves the road difficult to study scientifically. While accidents happen frequently, they fail to account for every disappearance. Cars have gone off the road, slid down embankments, or become stuck in mud, yet some vehicles appear completely intact with no occupants. Tire tracks sometimes lead into the forest and stop abruptly, suggesting that whoever or whatever left them moved beyond the reach of ordinary observation. These inconsistencies make the ghost road a puzzle that defies logical patterns. The air along the road often feels charged, thick with humidity and the scent of wet earth. Fog drifts from the riverbeds and merges with low clouds that cling to the hillsides. Travellers describe a sense of time stretching, moments seeming longer or shorter than they should. Even in daylight, the road can feel empty of sound, as if the forest itself holds its breath. This subtle distortion of perception is part of what makes the road so unnerving. Footprints occasionally appear in muddy sections, only to vanish in ways that cannot be explained. They sometimes head toward the forest and simply end, leaving no evidence of further movement. Locals have learned to recognize these anomalies, and some avoid the road entirely after nightfall. Despite modern roads and improved lighting elsewhere, the ghost road retains a reputation that is difficult to shake. Some stretches of the highway twist into narrow tunnels of bamboo and cedar, where sunlight barely penetrates and fog lingers for hours. The combination of natural isolation, unexplained vanishings, and subtle distortions of perception ensures that this road continues to intrigue and unsettle anyone who drives it. At the far end, where the hills open slightly and the mist begins to thin, the road seems calm, but its quiet promises nothing about what may have been lost along the way. Route 44, Vermont. Route 44 cuts through the heart of Vermont's Green Mountains, winding past small towns and thick forests. The road narrows suddenly in some stretches, hemmed in by steep hills and dense trees that block sunlight. The air is often cool and damp, carrying the scent of moss and pine. While the highway appears peaceful during the day, locals speak quietly about disappearances that span generations, events that leave no trace and few explanations. The forest surrounding Route 44 is a mixture of deciduous and evergreen trees, creating shadows that shift with every gust of wind. Some areas are so dense that daylight barely touches the ground, leaving the road feeling enclosed and isolated. This natural barrier has complicated searches for those who have vanished. Police records show multiple missing person cases dating back to the 1950s, but despite thorough investigations, many remain unresolved. Rolling down from the peaks, the mist sometimes swallows the surroundings almost entirely. It can appear without warning, blanketing the road and muffling all sound. Drivers report that even familiar stretches of highway feel unfamiliar in these conditions. The combination of isolation, narrow turns, and heavy mist creates a sense of disorientation that has led many to fear driving alone after sunset. Some bends along Route 44 appear particularly linked to mysterious disappearances, according to historical accounts. One of the most well-known cases occurred in 1973, when a family of 3 vanished on a stretch near the town of Wilmington. Their car was later found parked off the side of the road, doors locked, with no evidence that they had stepped outside. Local newspapers at the time reported that search teams combed the area for weeks without uncovering a single clue. The road is also known for sudden drops in elevation and hidden ditches that are difficult to navigate. In winter, snow and ice make these hazards more dangerous, though disappearances have occurred in summer months as well. In many of these cases, vehicles appear undamaged, yet the occupants cannot be found. Investigators have noted that some tracks lead toward the forest but stop abruptly, leaving no trail to follow. Wildlife is abundant along the highway, but even nature seems to behave oddly in certain sections. Birds avoid some parts of the forest, and deer are rarely seen near areas where people have gone missing. Locals speculate that subtle changes in the environment may indicate sections of the road that are inherently more hazardous or unpredictable. The unusual behaviour of animals adds another layer of tension for anyone travelling Route 44. There are abandoned properties along the highway that hint at a long history of human presence. Old barns, unused cabins, and remnants of farms appear suddenly from the trees and then vanish as quickly as they came. These structures often sit near spots where people have disappeared, giving the highway an unsettling air. Some theorise that the combination of natural obstacles and remnants of the past contributes to the road's reputation as a place where things can vanish without warning. Technology offers little help. Cell phone signals are weak or inconsistent along much of the highway, and GPS devices often lose accuracy in the mountains. This isolation has made it difficult for authorities to track missing persons in real time. Even modern search equipment cannot always overcome the natural challenges posed by the dense forests and shifting weather patterns. Locals maintain a cautious respect for the road. Stories passed down through generations describe travellers vanishing without a sound, leaving behind only abandoned vehicles or personal items. Some people refuse to drive Route 44 at night, citing an unease that comes from the combination of dense forest, fog, and the unresolved history of disappearances. Even those who travel it during daylight report a lingering sense of tension. The interplay between the road, the forest, and the mountains creates an environment where the ordinary and the inexplicable coexist. Shadows stretch longer than they should, and time seems to bend slightly along the curves. The combination of natural isolation and unresolved vanishings ensures that Route 44 remains a place where the forest itself feels capable of keeping its secrets. Somewhere along the winding path, where the fog thickens and the trees crowd the road, the highway holds mysteries that may never reveal themselves. The Old Military Road, Scotland. The old military road winds through the Scottish Highlands, a relic of the 18th century built to move troops across rugged terrain. Moss and lichen cling to its stones, and grass often creeps across the cobbled surface, softening the edges of what was once a strategic route. Today it is abandoned in many sections, overgrown with heather and bracken, giving the sense that the landscape itself is reclaiming the path. Travellers who enter these stretches report a sudden feeling of isolation, as if the road exists outside of time. History tells of its military use during the Jacobite uprisings, with troops moving between towns like Dunkeld and Inverness. While the road's origins are documented, its modern reputation is less official. Over the years, stories have emerged of hikers, cyclists, and even occasional drivers disappearing along the remote sections. Police reports indicate that searches often yield nothing, despite clear evidence that people entered the area. The combination of documented history and unexplained vanishings gives the road a strange duality, rooted in both fact and mystery. The terrain around the road is particularly unforgiving. Hills rise abruptly, streams cross the path in unexpected places, and hidden gullies can make navigation treacherous. In winter, snow and ice make certain sections nearly impassable, though disappearances are not limited to the cold months. In some cases, people vanish while conditions appear calm and safe, deepening the puzzle. The landscape seems indifferent yet strangely watchful, shaping the road in ways that confuse even experienced travellers. Dense forests and rocky outcrops flank parts of the road, creating areas where visibility is extremely limited. Shadows linger long after sunset, and the path can appear to narrow suddenly, forcing travellers to slow their pace. Vegetation often covers ruts and uneven surfaces, making it difficult to distinguish natural hazards from ordinary road features. Search parties describe a disorienting mix of open spaces and hidden corners, as though the road itself rearranges the landscape around it. Some sections of the old military road intersect with abandoned villages and ruined stone bridges. These remnants of past activity provide clues that people once passed through here regularly, yet they also contribute to the eerie atmosphere. Walls crumble into the earth, and pathways vanish into brush. Visitors often notice that the further they move into these areas, the quieter the surroundings become, as if sound itself is absorbed by the hills and forests. Local folklore adds another dimension. Tales persist of travellers who entered the road and were never seen again, sometimes with only a piece of clothing or a bicycle left behind. Some villagers claim that the road carries the presence of its military past, a lingering energy that disorients or misleads those who are unfamiliar. While these stories are not verifiable, the consistency of reports across generations has cemented the road's reputation as a place to approach cautiously. Technology is limited in the Highlands, mobile phones frequently lose signal, and GPS devices can be unreliable on the narrow, winding stretches. Even experienced hikers sometimes struggle to maintain orientation, and search and rescue teams have noted that missing persons may be close yet unreachable due to the terrain. This combination of natural obstacles and technological limitations leaves much of the road's secrets beyond scrutiny. Weather contributes further to the mystery. Mist can descend rapidly, cloaking the path in grey and muffling sound. Wind sweeps through the valleys, carrying odd echoes that make it difficult to judge distance or direction. Travellers describe the sensation of moving through a corridor where the elements themselves seem altered, amplifying the feeling that the road is unpredictable and alive in its own way. Footpaths branching from the main route can lead into deep forests or rocky hillsides. In several cases, tracks toward these areas stop abruptly, leaving no evidence of further movement. These sudden endings add to the sense that something about the road defies ordinary logic, creating an impression that people can vanish, as if swallowed by the land itself. Even as daylight returns and the mist lifts, the old military road retains its enigmatic presence. Its combination of history, natural obstacles, and unexplained vanishings ensures that travellers will approach with caution, knowing the path has a story it will not fully reveal. After hours of trekking, the surrounding hills swallow all sound, leaving the path ahead hauntingly silent and inscrutable. The Highway to Nowhere, West Virginia. In West Virginia, the Highway to Nowhere stretches into the mountains before vanishing into a dense forest, seemingly leading nowhere. Satellite images show the path as a thin line snaking between hills, but on the ground it feels far longer and narrower. Trees crowd close to the asphalt, and the terrain shifts constantly, creating sudden dips and sharp curves that are difficult to anticipate. Even in daylight, the road can feel suffocatingly enclosed. Construction on the highway began in the 1960s but was never fully completed. Sections of pavement suddenly stop, leaving stretches of gravel and exposed earth. In some areas, guardrails vanish, leaving steep drops into forested valleys. The unfinished nature of the road has fueled local stories about travellers who entered and never returned, a reputation that has persisted for decades. Though unpredictable, the pattern of disappearances along this road is enough to attract attention. Police records from the 1970s and 1980s document at least 4 cases in which drivers vanished while travelling alone. Vehicles were later found intact, often with belongings still inside. In every case, searches of the surrounding forest produced no evidence, as if the terrain itself had swallowed the people completely. The natural environment adds to the road's danger. Dense pine and oak forests flank the asphalt, while hidden gullies and unstable slopes make it difficult to pursue anyone who disappears off the pavement. Fog frequently drifts down from the mountains, reducing visibility and creating a sense of isolation. Even experienced hikers and drivers report feeling disoriented as they navigate the winding path, unsure of where the road will lead or end. Some of the most unsettling accounts involve abandoned vehicles. Cars have been found parked near the edges of the forest, engines running, but no occupants inside. Tyre tracks sometimes lead into brush and undergrowth, only to vanish within a few feet. Dogs brought to search these areas reportedly refuse to enter, hesitating as though sensing something invisible. These anomalies have baffled authorities and left locals wary of the highway. Subtle forces seem to emanate from the surrounding mountains. Sound behaves strangely here, echoing or disappearing entirely, and shadows from the trees shift unnaturally across the road. Travellers describe sudden drops in temperature and a feeling of being watched, though no human presence is ever found. Even wildlife behaves differently, with birds and small mammals avoiding certain sections altogether, leaving parts of the forest strangely quiet. Certain documented disappearances occurred while travellers were on everyday journeys, not in risky situations. People driving to work or visiting nearby towns entered the highway without concern, yet vanished unexpectedly. These incidents suggest that the threat is not limited to extreme weather, mechanical failure, or poor road conditions. Instead, it hints at an underlying mystery tied to the road's isolated and unfinished nature. Valleys and rugged terrain make navigation unreliable. GPS signals falter in valleys, and cell phone reception is spotty along most of the highway. Even mapping software often shows the road as continuous, hiding its abrupt endings and dangerous curves. This makes real-time tracking or emergency response difficult, leaving travellers at the mercy of both the terrain and whatever unknown forces might be present. The highway's reputation is steeped in eerie stories. Stories tell of people entering the road and vanishing entirely, leaving only faint tyre marks or scattered items behind. Some claim the road is cursed, a path that exists between places in ways ordinary maps cannot capture. While these accounts cannot be verified, the consistency of such reports over decades has reinforced a culture of caution among residents. Nature itself seems to conspire against travellers. Heavy rain can turn gravel sections into slippery mud, while low-hanging clouds cling to the hills and obscure the path ahead. Even a brief storm can make the road seem longer, darker, and more unpredictable. The interplay of natural isolation, unfinished construction, and repeated disappearances has created a corridor where ordinary rules seem to lose their power. At the point where the pavement abruptly ends and the forest thickens, the road seems to pause, as if hesitant to reveal what lies beyond. BR 101, Brazil. Covering over 4,500 kilometres of Brazil's eastern coast, BR 101 cuts through urban landscapes, wetlands and dense tropical forest. The road's southern sections, particularly in Espírito Santo and Bahia, are less travelled and more isolated, with stretches of jungle pressing against the asphalt. Vehicles pass through these regions at irregular intervals, leaving long segments quiet and shadowed. The road seems alive in these areas, with the rainforest pressing close, hiding both paths and the unknown. Reports of vanishings along BR 101 are sporadic but persistent. In 1987, a family travelling from Rio de Janeiro to Salvador disappeared near the small town of Linhares. Their car was later found abandoned, doors locked and personal belongings left untouched. Police investigation found no evidence of foul play or environmental hazards, and the surrounding forest appeared undisturbed. Local authorities noted that the family's disappearance was part of a pattern in the area, though the incidents remained unsolved. The jungle itself adds a layer of mystery. Rainfall is frequent and heavy, turning roadside earth into mud and swelling small streams into unpredictable torrents. Trees and vines can grow rapidly over abandoned paths, erasing evidence and confusing search efforts. Sounds behave strangely within the dense foliage. Footsteps echo or vanish entirely, while wildlife remains oddly silent in some sections. The road, entwined with jungle, creates a labyrinth where people can disappear without a trace. Automobiles have appeared in circumstances that defy explanation. In 1994, a truck transporting produce was found stopped along a narrow stretch near Teixeira de Freitas, its engine running, cargo intact, but no driver present. Tyre marks led briefly into the forest before disappearing. Police investigations noted the odd consistency of these cases, with disappearances often occurring where the forest crowding the road is thickest. Even experienced drivers find navigating these sections unnerving, as the jungle seems to bend perception of distance and direction. Natural conditions seem to heighten the highway's unease. Sudden storms appear without warning, reducing visibility and making the road slick and treacherous. Fog rises from the mangroves near coastal sections, mixing with mist from rainfall. In these conditions, travellers describe a sense of being watched, though no one is present. Even animals sometimes vanish from sight, leaving stretches of the road eerily silent. These environmental factors seem to magnify the mystery, making every bend and curve unpredictable. Long before modern traffic, the road had claimed its victims. Anecdotes from locals tell of early travellers in the 1960s vanishing while traversing the jungle-clad sections. These stories are often dismissed as folklore, yet the consistency of accounts across decades has created a cautious respect for the road. Residents speak of BR 101 as a place where human presence feels fragile, and the forest surrounding the highway seems patient, waiting to reclaim whatever enters. Infrastructure plays a role in the dangers of the route. Certain bridges and elevated sections were built over swampy areas or uneven terrain, and maintenance is sometimes irregular. Missing vehicles are frequently found near older structures or stretches that are less monitored. Investigators suggest that these features may contribute to accidents, but in several cases they fail to explain why occupants vanish while the vehicles remain undisturbed. Safety is precarious along the most remote stretches. Cell phone signals are weak or non-existent, and GPS devices often lose accuracy under the dense canopy. Travellers attempting to call for help or report their location can find themselves entirely cut off, deepening the sense of isolation. Rescue operations in these regions are challenging, and the jungle's density can hide evidence for weeks or months. A sense of caution surrounds the highway among those who travel it regularly. Drivers, particularly truckers and long-distance travellers, share stories of routes where disappearances are rumoured to occur. These accounts emphasise caution, especially at night or during heavy rain. Even those familiar with BR 101 acknowledge that certain stretches carry a tension that cannot be explained by the road itself. The combination of jungle, isolation and repeated vanishings creates a corridor where normal rules seem suspended. Vehicles, people, and sound vanish without clear cause, leaving behind a highway that stretches endlessly yet hides secrets within its green walls. Along the asphalt where shadows cling to the jungle edge, BR 101 holds more than asphalt and paint. It carries stories that have yet to surface. Transfagarasan Highway, Romania. Rising above steep valleys, Transfagarasan Highway snakes through the Carpathian Mountains, plunging into hairpin turns that challenge even the most experienced drivers. Its concrete and asphalt follow curves carved by both human engineering and natural forces. The landscape is dramatic, with cliffs on one side and deep gorges on the other, but the road's beauty conceals a history of sudden disappearances. Travellers have gone missing along isolated sections, leaving vehicles abandoned and authorities puzzled. Completed in 1974 under Ceausescu's rule, the highway was originally designed as a military route. Its construction alone was perilous, involving harsh winters, landslides, and accidents that claimed numerous lives. Modern travellers still contend with the remnants of this dangerous geography. Slopes remain unstable and rockfalls can appear without warning. Authorities caution that certain stretches are particularly risky, and several missing person cases have occurred where these hazards intersect with remote sections. Some of the original tunnels still show unexplained markings on the walls that locals claim were never made by workers. The environment shifts suddenly under the influence of violent storms and creeping fog. Morning fog can descend suddenly from the mountains, obscuring curves and narrowing visibility to mere feet. Summer storms bring heavy rain that washes debris onto the asphalt, while winter snow and ice render the road nearly impassable. Locals report that the fog sometimes seems unnaturally thick near sites where people have disappeared, creating a sense of being separated from the surrounding world. Wind and terrain distort the senses in ways that unsettle travellers. Valleys channel sound and amplify it strangely, making ordinary noises seem distant or distorted. Shadows cling to the cliffs and bends, altering perception of distance and speed. Drivers navigating these curves often describe fleeting glimpses of motion at the edge of vision, trees, rocks, or shapes that vanish when approached. These visual anomalies contribute to a sense that the highway is unpredictable in ways that are not entirely explained by the terrain. Evidence from abandoned vehicles adds another layer of unease. In some cases, cars are found with doors unlocked and personal belongings left inside, as though the occupant simply vanished into the mountain air. Tyre tracks sometimes lead to sheer drops, forested slopes, or rocky outcrops, yet no further signs appear. Investigators note that these patterns defy ordinary explanation, suggesting that something about the road itself encourages sudden, unexplained disappearances. Occasionally, personal items from vanished travellers are found hundreds of metres from where their vehicles were abandoned. Remoteness heightens the sense of danger. Mobile reception is weak across many segments, leaving travellers unable to call for help. Narrow tunnels and long stretches between settlements mean that assistance can take hours to arrive. Rescue teams often report that the terrain is difficult to navigate, with cliffs, sharp turns, and overgrown paths limiting access. These obstacles help explain why so many disappearances remain unsolved, though they do not clarify why people vanish even when travelling carefully. Stories and legends surrounding the highway contribute to its mysterious reputation. Villagers speak of mountain spirits and ghostly lights appearing near remote sections of the highway. While these tales are anecdotal, they're repeated across generations, often coinciding with sites where disappearances have occurred. Even skeptical travellers note a subtle tension while driving these stretches, a feeling that the mountains themselves are observing and responding to anyone passing through. Careful observation shows that ordinary rules of safety can feel suspended here. Every bend and climb forces heightened awareness, and the slightest distraction can lead to danger. Yet disappearances are not always tied to accidents or recklessness, making the road's mystery particularly unsettling. The interplay of geography, climate, and human presence produces moments where control and certainty feel fragile. Records indicate that vanishings occur in all seasons. Historical documents show that disappearances have occurred both in summer and winter, during daylight and after nightfall. The pattern suggests that no season or time guarantees safety, and that certain sections of the highway hold conditions that remain inherently difficult to understand. Maps, signage, and guides cannot account for what has been lost along its curves, leaving travellers to navigate both terrain and uncertainty. At the highest points, where cliffs and tunnels enclose the road, the highway winds between stone walls and sky. Mist and shadow gather along these passes, and the mountains keep their secrets close, letting the wind carry them silently over the Carpathians. The Ghat roads, India. Mist clings to the winding passes of India's western Ghats, where narrow roads twist along steep mountainsides. These paths were carved centuries ago, often by hand, and their isolation remains pronounced even today. Travellers moving cautiously along the curves sometimes vanish without a trace, leaving vehicles abandoned or personal belongings scattered. The roads themselves reveal centuries of challenge. Some stretches are carved directly into cliffs, with sheer drops on one side and dense jungle on the other. Landslides during the monsoon season can appear without warning, sometimes burying paths completely. Even modern vehicles and experienced drivers face the sudden hazards these ancient roads present. Certain stretches are bordered by sheer drops with no guardrails, where even a slight miscalculation can be deadly. Travellers sometimes notice the road narrowing suddenly, as if the mountain itself is closing in. Monsoon winds can shift debris or loosen rocks, making familiar paths unpredictable within minutes. Villages nearby offer fragmented accounts of disappearances. Locals describe sudden storms, fogs, or strange noises just before travellers went missing. A few cases recorded in district police reports in Karnataka and Kerala note people disappearing while driving alone with no signs of accidents. Some eyewitnesses describe hearing sudden, unexplained echoes or distant cries that vanish as quickly as they appear, adding to the eerie atmosphere of the Ghats. Rainfall transforms the Ghat roads unpredictably. Heavy monsoon showers can wash away sections of the asphalt, creating temporary gaps or unstable edges. Travellers have reported that water sometimes pools in unusual formations, masking dangerous drop-offs. In some areas, even tyre tracks vanish into mud, leaving no indication of the vehicle's path. Sudden landslides have buried sections of the road completely, sometimes leaving only fragments of vehicles visible afterward. Shadows and light play tricks along the forested stretches. Trees growing close to the road create sudden patches of darkness, and sunlight filtering through dense foliage can momentarily blind drivers. Hikers and drivers alike report glimpses of movement, shapes at the corner of vision that vanish when approached, adding to the road's unsettling reputation. Local wildlife contributes to the mystery. Monkeys, deer and leopards are often seen near the road, but sometimes travellers report hearing movement that doesn't match any animal. Footprints and broken branches are occasionally found in areas where no humans or animals should have passed. Abandoned vehicles are a recurring mystery. Some are found with the engine running, doors unlocked, or belongings untouched, suggesting occupants left suddenly. Investigators occasionally discover tracks leading into thick forest that end abruptly, leaving no trace of where the missing person went. Occasionally, travellers' footprints are found leading into dense forest that later disappears entirely, as if swallowed by the jungle itself. Isolation amplifies the sense of danger. Many passes have poor mobile reception, and the nearest settlements are often hours away. Rescue operations are complicated by narrow roads, steep terrain, and overgrown paths, which prevent vehicles from reaching affected areas quickly. These factors help explain why many disappearances remain unresolved. Remote temples and abandoned tea plantations along the route are sometimes associated with disappearances. Travellers exploring these areas have reported sudden, inexplicable changes in temperature or orientation, as if the path ahead has shifted. Villagers sometimes leave offerings at these sites, claiming they honour spirits that guard the mountain passes. Folklore intertwines with these events. Locals speak of spirits, forest guardians, and lights that appear without source during heavy fog or nightfall. While unverified, these stories are repeated across villages and often overlap with areas where disappearances have occurred. Even skeptical drivers report feeling an unshakable tension while navigating certain stretches. The roads themselves seem to manipulate perception. Drivers frequently misjudge curves or distances, sometimes emerging from a bend to find an unexpected drop or obstacle. Some missing person cases involve drivers who are travelling cautiously, suggesting that the environment itself creates conditions that defy ordinary expectation. News articles and official reports describe repeated vanishings along the route. Disappearances have occurred in both dry and rainy seasons, in daylight and after nightfall. Authorities note that no time or weather pattern guarantees safety, and that the most dangerous stretches are remote and poorly maintained. When the sun breaks through and the fog clears, the Ghat roads still guard mysteries that disappear as swiftly as those who traverse them. Route 112, South Korea. Winding through the mountains of Gangwon Province, Route 112 cuts a path through dense forests and jagged ridges. The asphalt is narrow and often bordered by granite cliffs, leaving drivers with little room to manoeuvre. Streams spill across sections of the road after heavy rain, creating small reflective pools that distort perception and sometimes hide the edges of steep slopes. Travellers describe a sense of unease even on clear days, as if the forest itself watches those who pass through. The road's history adds to its enigmatic reputation. Built decades ago to connect remote villages, Route 112 later served as a strategic route during regional conflicts. Old military maps mark areas now abandoned, and some tunnels that were carved during that era remain in use, dark and damp, echoing every sound in unnerving ways. Local historians note that several workers disappeared during the original construction, leaving equipment and belongings behind, though records provide no explanation. Rock formations along the road create unpredictable shadows that shift with the sun. Drivers report that bends in the road sometimes appear farther or closer than they really are, making navigation challenging. Certain corners have sharp drops just beyond the guardrails, and travellers speak of a peculiar stillness at these points, as if the forest pauses before the mountain cliffs. Streams and small waterfalls frequently cross the route. Reflections in these waters have been reported to show shapes or figures that are not present in reality. Hikers and cyclists recount catching fleeting glimpses of movement, sometimes animals, sometimes something unidentifiable, that vanish when approached. These odd sightings are particularly common during early morning fog that clings stubbornly to the valleys. Villagers living along Route 112 maintain that the road is cursed in parts. Ancient shrines and stone markers are placed at specific bends, often with offerings of incense or food. Locals insist these shrines honour spirits that protect travellers from accidents, or warn them against proceeding carelessly. While many dismiss the stories as superstition, the markers coincide with points where traffic accidents and unexplained disappearances have historically clustered. The tunnels themselves present a distinct danger. Many are narrow, barely wide enough for 2 cars, and the walls are carved directly from rock. Drivers note that sounds echo strangely inside, and distant noises seem amplified, making it difficult to judge how close another vehicle, or something else, might be. Some tunnels are curved so sharply that drivers cannot see the other end until they are nearly inside, intensifying the sense of isolation. Fog in the mountains behaves strangely along this road. Unlike typical low-lying mist, it often appears to flow uphill along cliffs or linger in patterns that obscure some sections while leaving others perfectly clear. Travellers have reported that sunlight filtering through fog can create ghostly patterns on the asphalt, giving the impression of figures walking ahead even when no one is present. Roadside vegetation adds to the disorientation. Bamboo groves sway even when there is no wind, and dense pine forests seem to close in along the narrowest stretches. Wildlife sometimes ventures onto the road, but footprints and tracks occasionally appear in patterns that make no sense, leading off the asphalt into the forest and ending abruptly. Authorities have recorded these anomalies, though no clear explanation exists. Route 112 also intersects with abandoned villages and old tea plantations. The remnants of buildings are often hidden in the forest, half swallowed by undergrowth. Travellers exploring these sites report sudden drops in temperature, strange echoes, and a sense of being watched. Some locals claim that those who linger too long near these ruins are more likely to experience disorientation or vanish temporarily, only to reappear disoriented several kilometres away. Even the simplest drives along Route 112 carry a sense of unpredictability. Sharp S-curves, hidden rock slides, and shifting shadows demand constant attention. Yet the road's mysteries extend beyond physical hazards. The interplay of mountains, tunnels, forests, and folklore creates an environment where the ordinary rules of perception seem suspended. Travellers leave with an uneasy awareness that the road holds secrets beyond their understanding. At dusk, when shadows stretch across the valleys and fog begins to creep along the asphalt, Route 112 transforms into a corridor of stone and mist, where even the sunlit sections seem to hide movement. The mountains rise silently on either side, carrying whispers of the many who have passed through and disappeared. The road keeps its own counsel, allowing only glimpses of what lies within, and travellers continue to wonder what unseen forces linger among its curves. The Northern Road, Tasmania. Between river valleys and farmlands in northern Tasmania, some roads seem to swallow travellers whole. Unlike many highways, it carries a sense of quiet isolation, even near small towns. Farmers and locals have long whispered about travellers who never reached their destinations. One such case, recorded in a 1936 Launceston newspaper, involved a bushman named Alfred Keating, who set out to check fences along the road and was never seen again. Search parties combed the area, finding only a snapped fence post and his horse grazing near a creek. Several stretches of the road follow natural fault lines that create uneven terrain. Along these segments, cars and horse-drawn wagons often veer unexpectedly, and some travellers have reported losing sight of familiar landmarks. In 1958, a delivery driver vanished near the limestone escarpment outside Georgetown, His vehicle was later found near the road's edge, but no trace of him remained. The geological instability of these areas may explain accidents, yet the suddenness of the vanishings defies simple reasoning. Local historians note that the Northern Road was a known route for bushrangers in the 1800s. Hideouts tucked into gorges and under thick tree cover provided refuge for those fleeing authorities. Some documented accounts describe travellers or postal carriers who disappeared while crossing these hidden spots. Diaries from settlers occasionally mention goods left behind on the road or letters that never reached their intended recipients, hinting at strange and unexplained events that extend back centuries. Rivers that intersect the road carry their own dangers. The Tamar and Supply rivers rise rapidly after rainfall, flooding surrounding lowlands. In 1942, a fisherman travelling along the river crossing near Yorktown failed to return despite good weather. His boat was later discovered anchored to reeds, with no other sign of him. Locals speculate that hidden channels and quick-moving currents could account for some disappearances, yet, in other cases, no waterway was near when travellers vanished. Some of the road's forests conceal narrow ravines and sinkholes that are easily overlooked. In the 1970s, a group of surveyors vanished near a stand of eucalyptus trees east of Georgetown. Search parties followed footprints that abruptly ended at the edge of a small concealed depression. Modern mapping shows the ravine to be less than a metre deep, yet it effectively erased all traces, leaving the surveyors' fates unresolved. Such terrain features are peculiar to Tasmania and have no direct equivalent on other roads in the state. The Northern Road also passes near several small historical cemeteries. Gravestones from the early 1800s mark the resting places of settlers and bush rangers alike. Some of these sites are associated with legends of travellers disappearing when passing at dusk. In 1985, a tourist reported feeling compelled to leave his vehicle and take a detour after sensing something unusual near a graveyard at Perth. He later described seeing a shadowy figure in the distance, though no one was there when he returned. These accounts suggest a lingering memory of past events rather than simple superstition. Aboriginal history in the region adds another layer to the road's mystery. The Palawa people's oral histories include warnings about certain ridges and gorges where spirits were said to guard the land. Scholars note that many of the disappearances along the Northern Road occur near areas that align with these traditional warnings. While the exact interpretation of these tales is lost, they coincide with geographical anomalies such as sharp drop-offs and concealed hollows. Occasional modern reports continue to baffle authorities. Hikers, cyclists, and even postal workers have vanished over the last 20 years. In 2003, a lone cyclist travelling from Exeter toward Georgetown disappeared during clear weather, leaving only his helmet by the roadside. Investigators found no tyre marks, footprints, or signs of struggle, suggesting he may have been claimed by terrain features rather than human interference. The combination of geological quirks, river crossings, hidden depressions, and historical layers creates an environment where ordinary rules do not always apply. Maps, guides, and local experience cannot fully predict what happens along certain stretches. For those who travel it today, the Northern Road retains its quiet menace, a corridor where past and present vanishings remain part of the landscape itself. Close to the bend by the limestone escarpment outside Georgetown, the road still seems to hold the secrets of those who vanished long ago. Highway 3, New Zealand. Spanning New Zealand's North Island west coast, Highway 3 connects quaint towns, rolling farmland, and thick stretches of bush. Unlike the more famous highways of the country, this route carries a quiet tension. Locals have long whispered about travellers who vanished without warning, leaving vehicles behind or never arriving at their intended destinations. One notable case in 1979 involved a family driving from New Plymouth to Wanganui. Their car was found abandoned near a bend, doors locked, with no sign of struggle, and no trace of the family was ever recovered. The geography along Highway 3 contributes to its reputation. The road frequently runs alongside steep river gorges and cliffs, particularly near the Mokau and Wanganui rivers. Erosion is common along these edges, creating sudden drop-offs that appear harmless but can conceal hidden dangers. A solo traveller in 1984 disappeared near a creek crossing north of Waitutara. Searchers found his footprints fading into the riverbank mud, but no further trace of him. Some locals speculate that shifting earth and hidden sinkholes may explain certain vanishings, though others insist some events defy natural explanation. Early European settlers used segments of this route for transporting livestock and goods. Historical records indicate that travellers occasionally disappeared while moving between remote farms. In 1892, a mail carrier travelling through the inland bush section was reported missing after failing to deliver parcels to a homestead. Despite extensive searches by local farmers, only the mailbag was recovered, untouched and neatly placed near a river. These incidents suggest that disappearances along Highway 3 are not just modern phenomena, but have deep historical roots. The road's remoteness is reinforced by sudden changes in terrain. Sharp turns, dense vegetation, and narrow bridges make navigation challenging. In 1997, a motorcyclist disappeared while riding near the inland hills west of Stratford. Witnesses reported seeing the bike stopped on a sharp curve before the rider vanished. Search teams combed the area for weeks, but found no clues beyond the motorcycle itself. Local knowledge warns that certain bends feel strangely disorienting, with distances and landmarks appearing distorted in the morning mist. Rivers along Highway 3 have long been a source of both sustenance and danger. Flooding is common during heavy rain, and some crossings lack visible warning signs. In 2005, a fisherman travelling along the northern stretch of the highway went missing during calm weather. His vehicle was found parked beside the river, tackle and personal items left untouched. Even experienced locals admit they cannot explain how someone could disappear without any sign of struggle or accident, suggesting forces beyond the ordinary may be at work. The surrounding bush contributes to the road's eerie reputation. Certain forested stretches create natural tunnels of intertwined trees, blocking sunlight and creating perpetual shadows. A group of hikers in 1989 reported seeing a vehicle on the highway and later realizing it had vanished from their view without driving away. These visual anomalies reinforce the sense of unpredictability that defines the northern sections of Highway 3. Indigenous Maori history adds another layer to the highway's mystique. Some iwi recall stories of spirits inhabiting the rivers and forests along the route. Traditional warnings indicate that travellers should exercise caution when moving through particular valleys, especially after nightfall. While modern travellers may be sceptical, it is notable that several documented disappearances occur precisely in the areas identified in these oral histories. Even in recent years, Highway 3 continues to confound authorities. In 2012, a solo backpacker was reported missing while travelling from Waitara to New Plymouth. Searches revealed only her backpack along the roadside. GPS signals are weak in remote sections, and mobile reception is inconsistent, making real-time tracking nearly impossible. Some investigators argue that while terrain hazards may explain some cases, the complete absence of physical evidence in others remains inexplicable. Authorities noted that the surrounding hills create unusual echoes, making it difficult to determine the source of sounds, which has complicated multiple search efforts over the years. Highway 3's combination of steep gorges, dense bush, historical incidents and indigenous lore creates an environment where ordinary rules seem suspended. Travellers today must remain alert, yet even the most careful journeyers have fallen victim to its secrets. Shadowed valleys along the Macau River guard the highway's secrets, hiding what has vanished from the eyes of those who travel it. The Black Forest Road, Germany. Through the heart of southwestern Germany, the Black Forest Road threads past centuries-old woodland, seemingly frozen in time. Sunlight rarely penetrates the dense canopy, and narrow clearings appear like glimpses into another world. Travellers report that even familiar paths can feel disorienting, as if the forest itself rearranges behind their eyes. Disappearances here are less about vehicles left behind, and more about people vanishing while on foot, often along trails leading to forgotten ruins or hidden groves. In 1977, a group of amateur botanists entered a secluded area near the Kleinenz River and were never seen again. Some of the forest's oldest features seem to amplify its mysteries. Stone ruins, remnants of medieval hunting lodges, emerge unexpectedly along the roadside. One ruin, partially hidden by ivy and moss, is linked to multiple missing person reports between 1960 and 1985. Those who have visited describe hearing faint voices or footsteps in places where no one could be, suggesting the environment itself may mislead travellers. Authorities who later searched these areas found only subtle disturbances in the underbrush, leaving no clear trace of the vanished. Natural phenomena in the region often confound perception. Narrow valleys create echoes that distort sound, making it difficult to locate anything in the forest. In 1993, a lone hiker reported hearing repeated calls for help that seemed to circle around him, though no one was present. Biologists speculate that temperature inversions and the density of the forest can bend sound in unusual ways, but such explanations fail to account for why these acoustic anomalies appear near locations of unexplained disappearances. Caves and sinkholes add another layer of danger. Several areas along the road contain small cave systems that were once mined for silver or salt. Records show that locals occasionally went missing while exploring these sites, some as recently as 2008. The entrances are often overgrown and difficult to detect, and travellers unfamiliar with the landscape can quickly become lost. While there are maps of known caves, the forest has likely concealed additional passages that are no longer documented. In several cases, local spelunking clubs documented echoes and temperature changes inside these caves that seemed to disorient visitors, causing them to lose their sense of direction entirely. The Black Forest Road intersects with several pilgrimage routes, and historical accounts suggest that travellers have vanished while seeking secluded shrines. A 1954 journal describes a man walking to a hermitage who never returned. His companions searched for days without success. These shrines are often positioned in valleys or on cliffs, requiring narrow, unmarked trails to reach them. The combination of isolation and terrain creates natural points where people can vanish before anyone notices. Archaeologists note that some of these shrines date back to the 12th century, and nearby burial mounds and stone markers suggest the forest has long been a place where travellers disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Flora and fauna sometimes obscure what occurs in the forest. Thick undergrowth, tangled roots and fallen trees can hide evidence of movement. Hunters report that even during daylight, it is possible to walk meters without seeing anything beyond a few feet. In 1989, a forestry worker exploring a newly cleared path disappeared near an ancient grove, leaving only impressions in the soil that ended abruptly against a large root system. Such cases illustrate that vanishings here are less about accidents and more about the forest's capacity to conceal. Folklore remains deeply intertwined with disappearances. Tales of Waldgeister, the forest spirits, suggest that those who wander too far from marked trails may be led astray. Locals speak of lights dancing between the trees at twilight, drawing attention to paths that appear and vanish. While these stories are often dismissed, they align with patterns of where people have gone missing, remote wooded areas that are deceptively accessible yet difficult to navigate. The road's isolation makes rapid rescue difficult. Even experienced forest rangers note that some valleys require hours to traverse, and the forest can appear entirely uniform, disorienting anyone unfamiliar with it. Reports from search efforts describe returning to the same spot repeatedly without realizing it, reinforcing the notion that the environment can manipulate perception. Secrets still linger along the Black Forest Road, and those who wander too deeply may discover that the forest keeps its own record of them.